Turn your podcast into a thriving business. This is step one of my creative success framework. Do you see your podcast as a creative passion project, or is it the foundation of a thriving business, or do you hope it will be the foundation of a thriving business? If you are ready to take your podcast from hobbyist to professional mode, stick around. In this episode, I will show you how to lay the groundwork to turn your podcast into a business that creates influence, impact, and income. So stick around. Hello there, I am Gordon Firemark. I'm the podcast lawyer, and you are watching Legit or listening to Legit Podcast Pro. This is the first episode in our five-part series. Actually, we did an episode 0 last week, but this is the first, the 5-step framework for success as a creator business. And over the next few episodes, we are going to cover the essential building blocks to take your podcast from something you do for fun to something that generates real results. So in today's episode, we are diving into step 1, treating your podcast as a business. And we're going to talk about why shifting your mindset is key, how to set up a proper business structure, the systems you need to manage your finances, the basic legal compliance you need to take to protect yourself, and how to plan for long-term growth. And I hope that by the end of this episode, you will have a clear plan to start treating your podcast like the business it can be. So let's get started. First off, why you should treat your business as a podcast and why that matters. Well, look, for many podcasters, their show starts out as a passion project, a way to share their voice, connect with others, or dive deep into a topic that they care a lot about. And that is fantastic. Passion is what drives great content. But here's the thing. If you want to grow your audience, land sponsors, turn podcasting into a full-time career or business, passion alone won't be enough. When you treat your podcast like a business, you will open doors to opportunities. Sponsors and collaborators are far more likely to work with you if they see you as a professional. You'll create a stable foundation. A business mindset will help manage your time, your resources, and money more effectively. And frankly, just that mindset is such an important part of making things grow. You'll protect yourself. Operating as a business entity can shield you from legal and financial risks, which is critical in today's fast-moving digital world. And ultimately, treating your podcast like a business is all about setting yourself up for long-term success. And you know what? It all starts with building the right foundation. So step 1, establish your business structure. Now, to do that, the first step is to choose what kind of a structure. There are basically, for most podcasters, 3 or 4 main options. First off is the sole proprietorship or partnership if you're working with a team, with a partner. This is the default if you don't take any formal steps to establish the business. And while it's simple, it does leave you and the partners personally liable for everything that's related to the podcast. That's the debts, the taxes, that's any liabilities that might result from somebody being harmed, lawsuits, those kinds of things. So the next one, a limited liability company, an LLC, is a very popular choice for podcasters because it separates your personal assets from the business assets. That means that if someone sues your podcast, your personal bank account, retirement accounts, home, car, those kinds of things, those are protected against those, the risk of that lawsuit working out against you. The third factor is a corporation. Slightly more complex sometimes, but not always necessary for podcasters, unless you're running a big operation with lots of shareholders and you need to bring in financing and those kinds of things. So for most people, an LLC strikes the right balance between simplicity and protection. And setting one up is actually pretty straightforward. You choose a name for the company, make sure it's unique, not already in use in your state, file the necessary paperwork with your state's business office. You can usually do this online, or you can have a lawyer like me draft it for you and get it filed. And then once approved, you'll want to get an EIN, an employer identification number from the IRS. That's the taxpayer identification. And yes, that does mean you have to pay taxes as a corporation or an LLC. And it's free to get that tax number, and it lets you open a business bank account and file your taxes. And, opening that bank account is part of keeping your business-related income and expenses and assets and liabilities separate from your personal stuff. So if you're not sure which structure is right for you, it is worth consulting a legal advisor or maybe your accountant, your financial advisor, someone like that might be able to help you with that. Next up, manage your finances like a pro. Now, Now that you've set up your business structure, it's time to get finances in order. The first and most important step is keep those things separate. As I said, open that dedicated business bank account for the podcast. It makes it easier to track your income and expenses, file your taxes the right way, show potential sponsors and collaborators that you're serious about your business, and then create a simple system to track those finances. Do some bookkeeping. You want to keep your eye on income from sponsorships, affiliate revenue, merchandise sales, any premium subscriptions, any other way that you're making money with your show. And the expenses. Think about hosting fees, equipment purchases, marketing costs, anything else you spend to keep the podcast running. You don't need fancy tools to get started. You could use a spreadsheet or something simple like QuickBooks or Quicken or something. But if you are ready for something more robust, there are other tools out there in the marketplace as well. FreshBooks is great as well. Step 3 is to protect yourself with basic legal compliance. Staying on the right side of the law is very important. As I said earlier, you've got to get that EIN, that employer identification number, your tax identification. This is like a social security number for the business. You get it from the IRS, you fill out an online form and submit it, and they give you a number. If you want to hire employees, open that bank account, file taxes, you're going to need that EIN. Now, depending on where you live, you're going to want to make sure you check in about business licenses or to register your podcast name. Check with your local government to make sure you're compliant there. And think about registering a trademark as well. Anytime you work with sponsors, contractors, or co-hosts, you want to make sure that you have a written contract. These agreements will protect you and the people you work with by setting clear expectations and avoiding misunderstandings. Brad, I'm going to get to your question in a minute. If you are not sure where to start, my Easy Legal for Podcasters program has all the templates and instructions and the legal education that you might need about that. You can find out more about that at easylegalforpodcasters.com. Or better yet, I have a workshop coming up really, really soon. It's called Business and Legal Fundamentals for Podcast Growth and Success. You can check that out and register by visiting podcastlaw.net. So back to our regularly scheduled programming. Step 4 in this path here is to plan for long-term growth. Let's talk about this. Running a podcast business isn't just about managing what you're doing today. It's about building a vision for tomorrow. So start by setting goals for your podcast. Ask yourself, where do I want this to be in a year, 3 years, 5 years? Do that advanced planning. And once you've got those goals, break things down into smaller actionable steps. For example, maybe a quarterly goal and a monthly goal as well. So if the goal is to double your downloads this year, you might focus on improving the marketing, collaborating with other podcasters, investing in higher production quality, and looking for incremental changes that make improvements. If the goal is to land more sponsors, you might spend time refining your pitch or expanding your audience demographics. Document your processes along the way. Write down every step of your production workflow, whether it's from planning episodes to publishing and so on. This makes it easier to bring on help as the podcast grows. And that's what we talk about next week. So treating your podcast as a business is about more than making money. It's about creating something sustainable, impactful, and rewarding. And I've got a question here from Brad. I have an LLC to separate my business from my personal, but should I create an LLC for my podcast to keep it separate? Well, it depends whether the podcast is sort of part of the business or is it genuinely separate. You have a pest control business, you say, in the podcast, would be about the pest control industry. So if it's about marketing your business, then they're part and parcel of the same, and the podcast probably can live within the LLC for the business. If it were a completely different topic, I would give you the opposite advice, which would be separate them so you don't wind up with trouble on one side or the other. So if you are ready to take the next step, I hope you'll attend my next free workshop, Business and Legal Fundamentals for Podcast Growth and Profit, coming up soon. You can register, as I said, at podcastlaw.net. And be sure to check out my Easy Legal for Podcasters at easylegalforpodcasters.com. And you'll learn about how to do your entity formation for yourself, and that's that essential first step. We also talk about how to register your trademarks, protect your copyrights, set up contracts with your team, and of course, make the right kinds of deals with sponsors and funding sources. So don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and this channel. Hit the notification bell if you're on YouTube so you don't miss the next episode, where we do dive into step number 2, building your podcast team. And with that, I'll say thanks for watching. I'll see you again next time. Have a great day.